The instant I spotted the police cars rolling into my driveway, demolition notices gripped tightly in their hands, I knew Karen Pettin had crossed a line. She stood smugly at the edge of my property, arms folded over her garish pink HOA vice president polo, her signature smirk plastered across her face. A small crowd of neighbors gathered behind her, some anxious, others just nosy about the drama Karen had whipped up this time. "There it is, officers," she announced, her voice oozing satisfaction as she pointed a manicured nail at the modest cabin. "I just finished building in my backyard. That illegal structure has been an eyesore in our pristine Meadowvale estates for weeks. I want it gone now." The lead officer, a tall man with silver, streaked hair, glanced at the papers in his hand. "Ma'am, this complaint you filed claims the structure violates several HOA rules and lacks proper permits." "Exactly," Karen said, practically vibrating with glee. "As vice president of the Meadowvale Estates HOA, it's my duty to safeguard our property values from rogue homeowners who think they can ignore the rules." The officer turned to me. "Sir, are you the homeowner?" I stepped forward, keeping the calm I'd honed over 20 years as an architect. "Yes, officer, I'm James Sullivan, and I've lived here for 12 years. Then we need to discuss these violations." He started, but I raised a hand. "Absolutely, but first, you should know that as of 72 hours ago, I'm not just the homeowner, I'm the newly elected president of the Meadowvale Estates HOA." Karen's face went ashen, her mouth flapping soundlessly like a fish out of water. Let me rewind 3 months. That's when this saga kicked off. I'd been living quietly in Meadowvale Estates, designing commercial buildings by day and tending my garden on weekends. HOA politics never interested me. I paid my dues, followed the reasonable rules, and kept the neighborhood looking tidy. But then my father called with news that changed everything. At 78, his health was fading, and he needed to be closer to family. The assisted living options nearby were either full or outrageously priced, and the idea of sticking him in a sterile apartment gutted me. So I decided to build a small cabin in my large backyard. A place where Dad could keep his independence while I could help with his daily needs. I spent weeks drafting plans, ensuring every detail suited him. The 600-square-foot cabin would have a kitchenette, an accessible bathroom, and big windows overlooking the garden he'd taught me to cherish as a kid. It would blend seamlessly with the neighborhood's aesthetic, with cedar siding and shingles matching my main house. Following protocol, I submitted my plans to the HOA Architectural Committee in early September. The review was supposed to take 30 days, but I knew Karen had a habit of stalling applications she didn't like. Still, I was hopeful. The cabin met all size, setback, and design rules in RCC and RS. What I didn't expect was the political storm brewing in our quiet neighborhood. Our HOA president of 15 years, Robert Daniels, announced his retirement, triggering a special election. Karen, assuming her vice president role made her the obvious choice, jumped into the race. But residents were fed up with her petty reign over the past 2 years. She'd fined elderly Mrs. Chen $300 for leaving her trash cans out an extra hour. She'd forced the Andersons to repaint their house 3 times because the beige wasn't correct. She'd even tried banning kids' chalk drawings on driveways, calling them vandalism. One evening, a group of neighbors, led by Tom Bradley from 2 streets over, approached me. "James, we need someone sensible to run against Karen," he said. "Someone who knows an HOA should protect property values without making our lives hell." I hesitated but agreed after hearing more stories of Karen's overreach. I ran a quiet campaign emphasizing transparency, fairness, and community over fines and enforcement. The election in late November shocked everyone, especially me, when I won with 73% of the vote. Karen took the defeat badly, barely speaking during transition meetings and withholding key documents. My term wouldn't start until January 1, but the board let me attend meetings to get up to speed. Meanwhile, I pushed forward with the cabin. I'd gotten verbal approval from 2 of the 3 architectural committee members in October, so by early December, construction began. I hired a trusted contractor, secured all county permits, and shared the plans with neighbors. Most were supportive, especially after learning about my father's situation. Mrs. Chen even brought cookies for the crew, thanking me for being a good son, but Karen seethed from her window. She'd assumed my new HOA role would distract me from the project. When she saw the foundation poured, she snapped into action. First came official, looking letters on HOA letterhead she no longer had the right to use, claiming the cabin broke non-existent bylaws, exceeded size limits it clearly met, and would attract undesirable renters. When I didn't cave, she escalated, holding unofficial meetings with neighbors, spreading lies about zoning violations and lawsuits, snapping daily photos of the site, and even trying to scare off my contractor with threats of HOA blacklisting. Her biggest misstep came 3 days before my presidency began. Frustrated by her failure to stop the nearly finished cabin through proper channels, she bypassed the HOA entirely. She called the county building department, posing as the HOA president, a title she'd never held, and filed a complaint. She claimed I'd built without permits, ignored non-existent stop work orders, and intimidated neighbors. She forged documents, inventing fake HOA bylaws banning accessory dwelling units. Then, for good measure, she called 911, reporting an unsafe construction operation that needed immediate demolition, claiming the HOA would cover costs and had already approved it. That brings us back to that morning, with police in my driveway and Karen beaming with expected victory. "Mr. Sullivan," the lead officer said, recovering from my announcement, "regardless of your HOA status, we need to verify these permits." "Of course," I replied, pulling out a folder I'd prepared for this moment. "Here are my county permits, approved and signed. Here's my HOA application from September 15, and here's written approval from 2 of 3 committee members, which is a majority per our bylaws." The officer reviewed the documents while Karen stammered behind him. Those must be fake. I never saw any application." "Funny," I said, keeping my tone steady despite the growing satisfaction, "because HOA records show you received a copy on September 16. You signed the certified mail receipt." I handed over that document too, watching Karen's face turn from pale to crimson. The officer's expression hardened as he pieced it together. "Ma'am, did you file a false report with the county?" Karen sputtered. "I was protecting our neighborhood." "And did you claim to be the HOA president?" Her silence spoke volumes. The officer turned to his partner. "Cancel the demolition crew. We don't need them." Then to Karen, "Ma'am, filing a false report is serious. You should contact a lawyer." As the police prepared to leave, I seized the moment. "Officers, since you're here, as the incoming HOA president, I'll be calling an emergency board meeting tonight to address this. The neighborhood deserves to know about this abuse of power." Karen's eyes widened. "You can't. Your term doesn't start for 3 days, actually," I said, pulling out my phone to check the bylaws I'd memorized. Section 12. 4 states an incoming president can call a special meeting with 48 hours notice in emergencies or cases of legal liability. False reports and forged documents qualify. That evening, the Meadowvale Estates Community Center was packed. Word had spread, and nearly every homeowner showed up for what promised to be the most dramatic meeting in HOA history. Karen sat at the board table in her pink polo, trying to look authoritative, but her trembling hands betrayed her. I opened the meeting at 7 p.m., introducing myself as the new president and thanking everyone for their trust. Then I got to the point. "I've called this emergency meeting to address grave misconduct by our vice president, Karen Pettin," I said, my voice clear. "This morning she called law enforcement to my home, claiming my fully permitted cabin was an illegal structure needing immediate demolition." Gasps filled the room. I laid out the evidence, the forged documents, the false claim of being HOA president, the misuse of HOA resources, the lies to neighbors, the intimidation of my contractor. "This isn't just overzealousness," I said. "It's a betrayal of your trust in the board." I move for the immediate removal of Karen Pettin as vice president. The board vote was unanimous. Even Karen's ally, Treasurer Janet Morrison, voted yes. The community vote was overwhelming, with only 2 dissenters in a room of over 100. Karen stood, her chair scraping loudly. "This is a witch hunt," she shouted, her voice breaking. "I've spent 5 years protecting this neighborhood's standards, and this is my thanks." "No, Karen," I said firmly. "You've spent 5 years bullying neighbors under the pretense of standards. Leadership isn't tyranny." As she stormed toward the exit, I added, "Oh, and Karen, expect to hear from the county prosecutor about those false reports. The HOA lawyer will also contact you about legal fees from your actions." She froze at the door, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, Karen Pettin looked small, defeated. The rest of the meeting was productive. We discussed fairer architectural approval processes, created an appeals system for violations, and planned a spring community barbecue. The cabin, once a point of contention, would host the first gathering, with my father serving his famous chili. Neighbors shared their own stories of Karen's harassment, thanking me for standing up to her. Mrs. Chen hugged me, tears in her eyes, feeling vindicated after years of unfair treatment. Tom Bradley shook my hand. "We wanted balance in the HOA. You gave us more than we hoped for." 2 weeks later, as I helped my father settle into the finished cabin, I reflected on the irony. The structure Karen fought to destroy had become a symbol of change. From his new living room, Dad could see the garden we'd tended together when I was young. He sank into his recliner with a content sigh, able to live independently yet close to family. "Your mother always said you'd be a great leader," he said with a sly grin, "just needed the right push." I chuckled, thinking of the past month's chaos. "I just wanted to build you a home, Dad. I didn't plan a revolution." "The best revolutions start small," he replied. "One person doing what's right can change it all." A month later, the county DA office sent a letter. Karen had been charged with filing a false police report, identity fraud, and misuse of emergency services. She'd hired a pricey lawyer, but the evidence was airtight. She pleaded guilty to lesser charges to avoid jail, facing $5,000 in fines, 200 hours of community service, and 3 years of probation. Her real estate license, which she'd used to assert authority, was suspended pending state review. The social fallout hit her harder. She was a pariah. I saw her once more at the grocery store, rushing past the produce aisle where I was picking apples. Our eyes met briefly. Her surrogant gaze was now hollow. She looked away and hurried off. The next day, a "for sale" sign appeared in her yard. Within a week, she was gone, leaving Meadowvale Estates to recover from her oppressive rule. At the spring barbecue in my father's cabin garden, the neighborhood felt alive again. Kids played freely, their laughter mingling with neighbors' chatter. Elderly residents, once fearful of violations, relaxed in lawn chairs, swapping stories. My father held court by the grill, sharing tales of my childhood antics. The cabin, nearly torn down, stood as a testament to resisting abuse. As the sun set, Tom Bradley raised his beer. To our new president, who showed us an HOA should unite us, not divide us. The crowd cheered, and I felt a quiet pride, not just for winning against Karen, but for restoring our community. Later, while cleaning up, I found a box of old HOA files Karen had turned over. At the bottom was my cabin proposal from September. In the corner, in Karen's handwriting, was a faint note, "Approved, nice design." She'd signed off on it herself, likely during one of her impulsive approval sprees, then forgot in her crusade against me. I showed it to my father, who laughed until he cried. So she spent all that time and money fighting something she'd already okayed. Apparently, I said, filing the paper carefully, her need for control blinded her to her own actions. The next morning, I shared the find at our board meeting." The room erupted in laughter, the final release of years of tension. Even Janet Morrison, Karen's former ally, shook her head. $5,000 in fines, community service, probation, all because she didn't check her own files. As president, I ensured this story became Meadowvale Estates legend, a warning about unchecked power and the value of humble leadership. The cabin, once called an eyesore, became our community's heart, hosting book clubs, poker nights, and birthday parties. My father thrived there, becoming the neighborhood's unofficial grandfather. Somewhere, in whatever new place Karen fled to, I hope she learned that leadership is about service and fairness, not control. The police never returned with demolition orders. Under new leadership, disputes were resolved with dialogue, not threats. Meadowvale Estates transformed from a place of fear to a true community, all because one woman targeted the wrong cabin, unaware she'd already doomed herself with a forgotten approval scribbled in haste.